Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us again on Change Itself. We've got another great episode coming your way. I'm your host, Gus Minor, and I'm joined with Eric Demers. And if it's the first time joining us, welcome to our episode and our channel. And again, just as a reminder, you can get a hold of us at changeitself.com or find our channel on YouTube, Change Itself on YouTube, as well as Change Itself on LinkedIn. And no matter where it is that you're connecting with us, we really enjoy your comments and your feedback. So please, let's make this interactive. And looking forward to a great episode. And then today, Eric, we're diving into a pretty interesting one because I think that this is something that affects a lot of people in general. But when does my change initiative become the normal way of being, right? The transitions from projects to operations, for example,
I'll even throw you a curveball on that one. At what point does change, as in too many change initiatives or multiple change initiatives, become the norm? And do they, is it feasible? Can you get it done?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'm excited. It's a pretty big topic to unpack. So let's get right in there.
It is. I mean, for the most part, that's an interesting one too, because for the most part, people are like, I'm going to change this, I'm going to achieve X, and then it's just coasting from there. But in reality, it's just propelling you to the next change initiative. It's kind of a constant. And I think for some that might be afraid of change, they might not be realizing that you're in a constant state of change every time you wake up. Every day you wake up, there's something new coming at you in a certain aspect of life, right? Whether it's policy, whether it's municipal or regional impact, or whether it's something at work, or hey, something just happened at school and you got to change your whole day around because you just called because somebody's coughing too much in class, or like it's perpetual, right?
Yeah, it becomes there's a point where I guess in my experience, you get to a point where there's too much change. So you only have a capacity for handling so many change initiatives, if you will. And if we're trying to do too much at the same time or have too many initiatives going on at once, no matter what could be like you said, it could be work stuff, could be home stuff, but even at work, like if I look at from my time in role as manager of safety, if I had 3 different safety initiatives rolling out to the company, and then there's client initiatives happening at the same time. And maybe the site's trying to bring in a process improvement initiative, all happening at once. They're competing for people's time and energy. And it just becomes to a point where it becomes there's so much change, you feel bombarded, you almost feel attacked, if you will. And then it just kind of, one of them or some of them or all of them end up failing. So as you were saying that off the get-go, I know that wasn't the intent, but that's where my mind went right away when I heard it.
Exactly. And a lot of times, we think about the deliberate steps that we take when we implement change, right? Very, very deliberate training, very, very deliberate scheduling, very deliberate follow-ups and feedback, because we're all protective on making sure that change sticks, right?
Yeah.
And then once everybody's kind of on board and it seems like things are coasting, we kind of take those pressures off, if you will, right? We take those very, very specific controls, if you will, that we put in place and feather them off. So then how do we know that it actually stuck long-term? And how do people transition from understanding that this is a very hyped up, high energy, high focus initiative to this is just how you are now?
Yeah.
Moving forward, this is just what's so, right? Have you seen any interesting elements of that stuff with the different things that you've implemented?
Yeah, definitely have experienced it. And I'll say a lot of times it takes time to realize that you've actually gotten there. You got to sometimes step back and look at what you've accomplished. You go, well, that's cool that we're doing that now. But yeah, there's certainly been, and I've seen times where we may either let it go too fast or we stop paying attention to it and the change hasn't stuck. So I think it is important to pay attention and follow back and reflect on what you've done. So some tangible stuff. And again, I'll relate back to my experience when we're rolling out Sofvie is a lot of the times just getting a pre-op was going to be something that was, good to get from someone, or just a submission on a pre-task. And that was a big challenge. And it didn't take long that becoming the norm. If you step back 6 months later and like, wow, like I can't believe that that's actually happening. And I know that everybody's got them done because it wasn't the fact before. And you've kind of, sometimes you've let it go. You've forgotten to check in a little bit. And when you come back and you check it, and people are checking it and the supervisor's reviewing them, and the maintenance department is using it to build a dashboard, like, okay, that change is stuck, right? Like that change has become the norm. I think another cool one is when you take something away. So you've put in, whether it's a feature, sometimes it's not even an intentional feature, like something has happened in, I'm trying to think of some specific case or scenario because there have been a few, but nothing's coming to mind right this minute, where maybe we took the photo function out of a certain form because we didn't think people were using it. And all of a sudden, and because we wouldn't see them, but then that one or two people were using it, and it's like, it causes all kinds of concern and chaos.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting one. Or we might move something around on the form, right? We think the process flow, we get feedback from people. They want to see the process flow of having that item, move down the list a little bit. And when you do that and nobody knows about it, and all of a sudden you see the tickets pour in, the form is broken, the picture button is gone, but it's like, if you just scrolled a little further, it was there.
Yeah.
And so like, those are, to me, real life times where change has been like, I know that it's become the norm. And that there's been a few moments like that. And so we've had to develop sometimes communication strategies, knowing and anticipating when that would occur for people, and knowing that, that's a pretty integral part of what they're doing. So better communicate that and better get ahead of it so that it doesn't become disruptive.
Especially when it's there, it's because that's the one thing, is that when you're focused on feedback so much and you start collecting feedback on things, and you really want to make sure that people feel heard, so you implement these things that were based on feedback. It's remembering that this is probably like 5 or 10 people or 3 people or 1 person that gave you that feedback, and it was a really good idea, but the 98% of people that are behind them have no idea of this conversation. So now you got 2 or 3 people are like, yes, this has happened, and I'm so pumped about it. And everybody's like, what just happened? It's out of norm. It's out of, they have no context around it, right?
I take a page from the government, float a balloon, if you will. Hey, go run it by a couple of people. Hey, what do you guys think if we did this? Oh yeah, it's awesome. Or no, I would never do that for this. Okay, good. Thanks. Got it. And then, that's how I often would control what feedback I'd send your way around features and what's been going on and what's happening. And so that's, to me, that's the interesting part of it. But that's when you've achieved a norm, when you start asking around, and it would upset people if you changed what you've recently changed for them.
Well, and the nice thing about it too is that where change becomes the norm is also when, maybe at first it's like that, right? Where it's disruptive because they're just getting used to something, and then here it is changing again, and they're like, come on, I'm trying to get used to this, right? And then you get a lot of pushback on that regard. But then you get to the point where you start rolling things out, or you start doing things in pieces, and it's a non-event. People are just used to the fact that there's going to be changes, there's going to be things, because it's called iterations, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens too when you deliberately involve everyone in the conversation, especially at the beginning, where you're like, hey, we want your feedback, we want your concerns, and you keep that dialogue open. And then people realize, oh, this is the norm now, that we're just going to throw some ideas out there, and they may become a reality by tomorrow or by 2 weeks from now or whatever. Cool. Let's see what happens. And then they just absorb this change on a regular basis. And what maybe previously would have been a huge communication exercise to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on, over time becomes not a non-event. Unless it's something very, very drastic or specific, it becomes a non-event. You've seen that as well.
I've seen it. I've also seen it where it's it's really cool to see where you sometimes we roll things out with the specific site for a specific group because they're more apt to wanting to do that. And you can tell that people have now become accustomed to change or desire change or want to be involved, where it's like you're starting with the small group and then they've liked it so much that they've talked to the next guy and people are demanding access to this module or this thing. And like sometimes it's like you're not even maybe ready for the change, but people are ready for the change. I've seen that happen a few times. There's one piece is phones. So for a long time we had I don't have my phone in my pocket right now, but we had like 7-inch tablets, and that was the norm. And when we floated the idea of having a smaller device that fits in your pocket, a lot of people in management said, "Well, wait a second, that's going to be too small for people. They're not going to want to, they're going to need glasses or they're going to need something else." And then when you brought the phones out and said, "Well, tell me, use this. Tell me what you think about." Well, I want a phone now. I don't want the tablet anymore. And so that's one experience where like that change has become the norm. And it's like, well, they've got a phone now. When do I get my phone? And it's just, those are some real life like eye openers where you're like, yeah, like that change is there. It's stuck. It's there's no going back.
And that was one of the cool things that I read recently. Like as an example, you can even use the seatbelt, right? The seatbelt in a vehicle, and how that was not the norm. Like it got introduced, and then next thing you know, like where it was legislated that we have to wear these seatbelts, and it still took like 30 years to adopt the thing. But now the seatbelt comes in so many different forms and shapes and different sensors and different notifications, and they're constantly evolving on that technology. But then to us, it's just it's just that's what the seatbelt looks like.
It's second nature.
And then you move on, right? Yeah. That's very cool. Very cool. So I mean, it is something that we get questioned on all the time, right? When can I expect this to be in full effect? When can I expect this to stick? When can I expect this to like no longer need to be managed? And that's usually a conversation I end up having. It says, well, now that you're managing this, just be prepared that this is also a change for you, that moving forward, you're managing this,
And I mean, you will know. And at some point you're going to get to a point because it's uncomfortable. It's not something you're used to doing. So you're having to relearn a habit for yourself and to form that. And at some point it just becomes normal and you just don't want to do it any other way. Like, do I want to go grab an old soggy pre-op and review it, or have, 20 bankers box of them sitting in the back shop in case somebody ever comes to audit? Or do I want to be able to go check them and look at pictures and see what people are up to and comment on them and recognize them for it, or like see if the equipment needs any work from like 2 clicks? At first that seemed like a very big monumental task, but that has become the norm. And then if it's not happening, like something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. You're just going to get to the point where the change has happened and you just wouldn't want to go back to the other way. So
exactly.
To me, that's kind of it, is like looking back, acknowledging it, observing it, taking the time to go, oh, that's actually really cool. And to see that it's taken root, and it's actually to become feeling comfortable. And I was on the plane back from Elko last week or the week before, and I was watching a series on Tiger Woods and his golf practice. And one of the really interesting things that he was sharing that I actually kind of fits right in here is he talked a lot about feel in his hands and the feel of the swing or the feel of what he was doing. And he's like, in practice, he's like, I'm often relearning a swing and it often doesn't feel comfortable. And at some point, that change to my routine or change to my stance or change to my swing just feels normal. It feels right, was the thing that he was saying. And if I think about it, changing your golf swing or changing, a habit of how you do things at work is very similar, things. Like it might be a little bit different, but very similar concepts. And so once the thing, it feels like the norm, is probably kind of when you're there.
I mean, I guess it's no different than a pair of shoes, right?
Yeah.
You switch out those old pair of shoes that are finally all broken in and you're most comfortable in, but they're not really doing good for you. And then you go to a new pair, which is all back to the new standard. And then you're relearning how to walk with these shoes again. And you're relearning, your skin is relearning how to adapt to a new texture. You're, even from a heat perspective, right? Like there's different heat, different variables until you break those shoes in again. And then that becomes your new way of walking around, right? It's really as simple as that in general, but everything's always a little uncomfortable at first. And then you kind of suck at it too. You know what I mean? It's not like you're a pro at it right off the bat. Because it's off cadence and off routine.
It's normal to be uncomfortable. You got to live in uncomfortable for a while before you get comfortable.
And then I guess what happens is, especially in the workplace, one of the things that we talk a lot about as well is that initial group or those initial people that have gone through a specific change format, for them, it's change. For everybody else that's new behind them, it's just what's so.
Yeah.
It's not changed. Like that's just what's so.
You got people that used to do paper process and they've gone to the digital one. There's a change to go through the process, but somebody that knew that's getting onboarding, this is how we do it, gets picked up. This is how we do it. There's no process done learn. It's just, this is how we do it.
Yeah. And I guess that's probably the one thing that we can leave the audience with in general is that once that's when you've achieved like that mass acceptance is when you got new stakeholders coming in at the back end of it and they just blend right in, that it's not like this huge relearning process or if you will, or whatnot, and everybody's going in the same direction. I mean, you've kind of achieved that goal, right? And then that gives you the indicator as well that you're ready for the next one. You're kind of ready for that next change initiative. And that's what becomes the norm of just adopting change, right?
Exactly.
Very cool. So right, any final thoughts or any tidbits that you can put out there based on your experience, Eric, of what people can expect or how they should view things in general to kind of understand that it's going to become the norm?
I mean, expect noise, expect people to, in typical with change, there's different emotions, like it's uncomfortable. So people react differently to that, expect that. And then if you can bear through it just long enough, that change takes place and it just becomes the norm. So if I had to leave people with that, that's what I would leave them with. And then I'll take a plug at, we got the raise board coming. I'm getting set up for that. So it's going to be the same for myself in that initiative. So just really about focusing on, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be different, but getting better and getting ready for it is definitely going to make, reflecting on that and understanding when things become the norm, because we're going to be setting up new processes. And for people that have already been doing raise boring, it might be things that are done differently than what they're used to. So I think that'll just be the thing for me to focus on up and coming. So
yeah, and I really like that line that you said, where just when you think it becomes unbearable or you're about to quit, you're probably close to that line where you tip over to the other side, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, thanks a lot, Eric, for the great conversation, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well. For anybody that tuning in, and again, please participate. Go ahead and ring that bell or put a comment or both. And we'd love to hear from you and hear what your perspectives are on this topic. And we look forward to catching up on the next episode.